You didn't end up here by accident, and before your brain tries to shove that sentence into the cliché box, stop, listen. Over the past 3 days, something inside you has started to stir without asking permission. A tiredness that doesn't come from the body, a silent restlessness that shows up when you try to sleep and vanishes when you wake up, thoughts that return even after you try to erase them, the strange feeling that an invisible threshold is drawing near, as if something bigger than your routine is asking to pass through. You're not losing your mind. You're feeling what the entire planet is feeling between July 24 and 29, only almost no one has the internal infrastructure to name it. That's why you're in front of this video, and not somewhere else. What I'm going to show you in the next few minutes is the exact map of 5 days that ancient civilizations used to cross precisely this kind of window without getting lost. It's not mysticism. It's not folklore. It's engineering of consciousness applied to a real cycle that opens this week and closes on the night of the July full moon. If you follow through to the end, you'll walk away with a practical day-by-day protocol to turn that restlessness into direction. If you don't follow, that energy will turn into exhaustion, pointless arguments, wrong decisions, and you'll miss the window the way most people miss it every month, without even realizing they missed it. Between July 24th and 29, there is a stretch of time that the ancients called the 5 days that precede the clarity. It's not a pretty metaphor. It's a technical observation. Over thousands of generations, they realized that the phase from the waxing moon up to the exact moment of the full moon is not a neutral period. It's a ramp, a rise in psychic pressure that peaks when the moon is fully illuminated. And like any pressure rise, it exposes cracks. What you've been ignoring starts to show up. The conversations you postpone start knocking at the door. The decisions you push to next week start hurting in your body. Dreams become more intense. Skin becomes more reactive. Stupid arguments explode over ridiculous reasons, and you don't understand where so much emotion came from over so little. This isn't you getting worse. This is the moon doing what it has always done, pulling the hidden to the surface. The ancients understood that trying to live these 5 days, as if they were ordinary days, was like driving a mountain road with your eyes closed. So they created a protocol, a sequence, a 5-act ritual synchronized with the moon, which wasn't meant to attract magic but to not waste the pressure. Because pressure, if you don't know what to do with it, breaks you. And if you do know, it reorganizes you entirely. That's exactly the difference that separates those who come out of the July full moon clearer, lighter, and more directed, from those who come out more confused, more tired, and more disconnected than when they went in. And you get to choose which of the 2 groups you enter by what you do between today and next Wednesday. No drama, just math. For at least 6,000 documented years, and likely far longer, cultures without clocks, without printed calendars, and without electricity observed the moon as the most precise instrument for reading time. Egyptians, Sumerians, Celts, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, traditions from India, Tibet, and West Africa. All of them, without ever having spoken to one another, arrived at the same conclusion. The moon was not an object in the sky. It was a collective biological clock, a marker of internal cycles, and within that cycle, the full moon occupied a very specific place. It was neither the beginning of the cycle nor its end. It was the moment of revelation, the point at which what had been buried in darkness became, for a few hours, impossible to hide. The Egyptians associated the full moon with Thoth, the god of hidden knowledge made visible. The Andean peoples held their important assemblies under the full moon because they believed no one could lie with their face illuminated. Women gathered in circles, farmers deciding on the next planting, leaders talking about peace and war. Everything was scheduled to happen when the moon was full, and not out of superstition, out of field reading. They perceived that the human mind under the light of the full moon had difficulty sustaining its own lies, that the self-deceptions a person carried easily throughout the entire month began to crack, that relationships that were rotten began to stink, that jobs that were killing the soul began to ache in the body, and that the truths a person had been putting off began to gain volume inside their head, even without being summoned. The full moon was the silent tribunal of the soul, and the 5 days before it, the period of preparation to enter that tribunal without being destroyed by it. If you arrive at the full moon unprepared, it exposes you, and you don't know what to do with what has been exposed. If you arrive prepared, it shows you, and you already have the structure to turn exposure into decision. That is the difference the ancients guarded so carefully, and it is precisely that difference that has been lost. That is why I prepared the magic in 28 exercises, the 28 keys of awakening for you. It is a 28-day journey, one full lunar cycle, designed exactly so that you do not cross windows like this one without an instrument in your hands. Each exercise is a key that unlocks a layer of signal that most people live their entire lives without being able to read. It is for those who feel lost, different, overwhelmed, and know deep down that they need a real method to turn restlessness into language, shadow into clarity, signal into decision. The link is in the first pinned comment of this video. It is not a course to consume. It is a structure to cross. And if you feel you are exactly at the turning point, comment below the word ready, because that word acts as an energetic signature that you have accepted entering the conscious cycle. Now come back with me, because from here on things get practical. 24th of July, first day. And the first day has a single task, but it is the hardest of all. Observe. Do not act. Do not correct. Do not decide anything. Just observe. And here, most people already lose the game because the modern mind has been trained to solve before looking. You feel a discomfort, you rush to explain. Feel sadness, you rush to justify. Feel anger, you rush to unload it on someone. The ancients did the opposite. On the first day of preparation, they stopped, sat down, and let the body speak without cutting off the body's speech. They paid attention to 3 layers of signal. The first layer was internal signals. What emotion keeps appearing repeatedly in the last few hours? What thought won't go away, even after you've tried to change the subject 3 times? What dream did you have this early morning? And that keeps echoing inside your chest, even if you don't remember the details. What part of your body is asking for attention? The locked neck, the tight stomach, the heavy chest, the lump in the throat, none of this is random. All of this is language. The second layer was external signals. What conversation came out of nowhere with someone you hadn't seen in months, touching exactly on the subject you were avoiding? What number, what word, what image repeated abnormally in your last 2 days? What coincidence seemed too rehearsed to be coincidence? Ancient wisdom taught that, in the days leading up to the full moon, the external world begins to mirror the internal world much more sharply. Not because the universe is doing magic for you, but because your perception is sharper, and you start to see patterns that were there all month and you didn't see. The third layer, and this is the one almost no one can do, was to observe without judging, without deciding whether the signal was good or bad, without placing the signal inside a victim story or a deserving story. Just acknowledge. This is here. This appeared. This is asking for something. The whole first day, from sunrise to sunset, was dedicated to this raw listening. And whoever fulfilled this day with honesty discovered something that wasn't in the books. Most of our confusions are not a lack of answers. It's an excess of noise. And when you silence the noise for 24 hours, the answer appears on its own, without effort. If you can set aside these 24 hours of July 24th to do just this, without promising a solution to anyone, without trying to change anything, just observing, you will arrive on the 25th with a clarity that no coach, no therapist, and no book can deliver in one session. Because nothing is more powerful than your own listening when it finally stops being interrupted by yourself. July 25th and 26th, second and third day. And if the first day was the day to look at the mess, these 2 are the days to clear the mess out of the way. The ancients had a word for this phase. In several traditions, it was described as the burning before the light. The core idea is that the full moon amplifies everything inside you. If you arrive at the full moon carrying old weight, old hurt, poorly digested resentment, a promise you didn't keep to yourself, it will amplify that weight, and you'll spend the next 15 days sinking without understanding why. If you arrive light, it will amplify the lightness. Simple as that. That's why, on the second and third day, All effort was directed toward one thing: release. Not a romantic release, full of background music and pretty words, a dirty, uncomfortable, practical release. And there were 4 classic instruments for this, still used today by the lineages that still know what they're doing. The first instrument was writing, sitting down with paper and pen and writing unfiltered everything you no longer want to carry, names, situations, fears, old versions of yourself that you repeat even without meaning to. No pretty little list, raw writing. Writing you'd be embarrassed if someone read, that's the only kind that works. The second instrument was fire. After writing, the paper was burned, not as superstition but as psychological marking. The human brain needs a physical gesture to close a mental cycle. Without the gesture, the mind keeps reopening the same process month after month. Fire was the psychological enter key, the signal to the mind that that file has been sent to the trash and will not return to the inbox. The third instrument was water, a long bath unhurried, with the clear intention of washing off the body what the week stuck on. Some peoples used herbs, others used salt, others used only running water. The point wasn't the ingredient, it was the intention. The body understands symbolic language better than the mind understands logical language. The fourth instrument was silence. A period of meditation, prayer, or simply being alone without screens, without noise, without interruption. Doesn't have to be an hour, can be 20 minutes. But it has to be real. And here's the detail almost everyone misses. The ancients didn't use these instruments as separate techniques. They used all 4 in sequence: writing, fire, water, silence, in that order, because each one prepared the next. Writing discharged, fire sealed, water cleaned the residue, and silence integrated. Doing this on 2 consecutive days, between July 25 and 26, does more for your emotional health than 3 months of talking about yourself. That's why magic in 28 exercises exists. Each exercise is a practical sequence from these same lineages, so you don't have to depend on my voice next cycle. Link in the first pinned comment. If you recognize that you need this method, get in now, because this window closes soon. And if this is your day of burning, comment Libero below, because this word seals the gesture within your field. Back to the map. July 27th, 4th day. And here things change in nature. In the first 3 days you looked and you took. Now, you build. The ancients taught that the 4th day was the day of intention. But the word intention, the way modern spirituality uses it, has been so emptied that it's become synonymous with request. And that's not it. Intention, in the ancient lineage, is not what you desire. It is the direction you accept to follow. There is an abyssal difference between the 2 things. Desire is passive, you want and wait. Intention is active, you define and walk. And the full moon is the most powerful gateway of the month for imprinting an intention, because everything done with clarity under the full moon becomes hard to forget in the next 28 days. It's as if the moon acts as a mark on the calendar of your subconscious. That's why on the 4th day, the work was to formulate the intention with surgical precision. And surgical precision means 3 things. First, an intention must be specific, not "I want to be happy," not "I want prosperity." That's not intention, it's a party balloon. A true intention has contour. It has a verb. It has a mental deadline. I choose to end this work relationship by the next new moon. I choose to have the conversation I've been postponing with my father before the end of this cycle. I choose to stop sabotaging myself regarding money, starting by not opening the bank app with fear. Second, an intention must be something that depends on you. If the intention depends on someone else, it's not yours, it's a disguised expectation. And expectation is not imprinted in a lunar cycle, only decision is imprinted. Third, and this is the most important, an intention must come aligned with what the observation and cleansing phase of the first 3 days showed you. It cannot be an intention you've been repeating all year without fulfilling. It must be a new intention, born from what you saw when you stopped running. After formulating it, the ancients would imprint this intention in 3 ways. They wrote it on a new piece of paper, different from the burning paper. They spoke it out loud, a single time, so their own body could hear it. And they placed it somewhere visible, somewhere that would cross their gaze at least once a day until the end of the cycle. Simple, direct, and surgically effective. The entire fourth day was devoted to this stitching together of observation, cleansing, and direction. It's not the day to act on the intention, it's the day to formulate. Action comes later, and here is a wisdom that almost faded away. The ancients understood that the human mind, when it formulates a true intention under the full moon, activates a part of itself that stays dormant the rest of the month. A part that the ancient texts called the inner seer. The part of you that sees the next step before you can explain it rationally. That is why decisions made in this kind of window often seem, months later, like inevitable decisions, as if you always knew you were going that way. You didn't always know, you formulated it right, on the right day, the right way. July 28th, fifth and final day of preparation. The eve. And the eve of the full moon was, for the ancients, the most delicate day of the entire cycle. Delicate because, on this day, all the preparation of the previous 4 days begins to draw responses from the field. Dreams turn almost precognitive, synchronicities explode, encounters arise, old emotions come up to say goodbye, and most people, when they feel all that intensity, get scared, go into defensive mode, and sabotage everything they've done so far. That's why the ritual of the 5th day had a very specific function, to hold the field, to keep you from scattering exactly on the eve of the most important moment. And it was done in 2 parts. The first part, during the day, was an exercise in brutal gratitude. Not gentle gratitude like, I'm grateful for my breakfast. Brutal gratitude, one that acknowledges even what hurt. You list, with clarity, what this cycle taught you. The lessons you didn't ask for, but received. The people who left and in leaving brought you closer to yourself. The doors that closed and in closing pushed you where you needed to go. This is the part that integrates. Without this step, the cycle ends, but it doesn't close, and a cycle that doesn't close will hurt again next month. The second part of the ritual, and this one happens at night, is the direct encounter with the moon. It doesn't need to be complicated. Go outside, look at the sky, be silent, and gazing at the nearly full moon, surrender 2 things. What you want to leave behind, thanking it for having served you until now. And that intention formulated on the 4th day, offered to the light like someone offering a seed to the sun before planting. It's not a prayer of request, it's a contract of direction. You're not asking the moon to fix things. You're informing your own field that from that moment on you walk in the direction you formulated. The moon is the witness, not the executor. You are the executor. She is the landmark. And here comes a truth that almost no one has the courage to say. A portal is not an astronomical event. A portal is the turning point, where the cost of staying stuck in your current life becomes greater than the terror of taking the next step. You take the step, and then the ground appears. Never before. The July full moon won't save you. It will only illuminate you so much that staying still starts to hurt physically. And that's exactly where most people freeze, because seeing clearly without having the structure to act on what you've seen is one of the most frustrating experiences a human being can have. That's why Magic in 28 Exercises was built in the exact format of a complete lunar cycle. 28 days, 28 keys, one for each layer of signal that appears between one new moon and the next. The link is in the first pinned comment. If you've made it this far in this video, you are no longer in the phase of deciding whether you'll do it. You are in the phase of deciding when you start. And starting now, at the turn of this cycle, is different from starting 2 weeks from now, when the window has already closed. Join now, because this is the only day when the beginning of the method synchronizes with the beginning of your next real cycle. And here is the reason why the ancients guarded this knowledge so carefully, and why they were right to do so. The full moon was never just about the moon. It is a symbol, and the symbol points to something the rational mind resists accepting. There is a rhythm greater than yours, a rhythm that does not ask permission to happen, that does not care about your schedule, and that keeps moving even when you pretend it does not exist. And a human being has 2 options before this rhythm: ignore it and be dragged along by it in pieces, or acknowledge it and synchronize with it by choice. The ancients chose to synchronize, and by synchronizing, they discovered something that no modern self-help book will tell you in these words. Human life is not a straight line you build. It is a sequence of cycles you move through. And each cycle has a window of preparation, a window of revelation, and a window of integration. The full moon is the window of revelation. The 5 days before, the window of preparation. The 14 days after, the window of integration. And when you learn to read this map, a very strange thing happens. Life stops catching you off guard, not because nothing happens anymore, but because you begin to feel the movement before it arrives. You begin to recognize the days within the days. You begin to understand that that specific tiredness is not depression. It is the end of a cycle asking for closure. That specific restlessness is not anxiety. It is the beginning of a cycle asking for direction. That sudden clarity is not luck. It is the full moon doing its work inside you. And more importantly, you stop fighting your own rhythm. You stop trying to produce during the withdrawal phase. You stop trying to decide during the observation phase. You stop trying to start during the closing phase. You begin to collaborate with the cycle instead of running against it. And it is precisely then that magic, in the only honest sense of the word, begins to happen. Not because the universe changed, because you finally stopped rowing against the current that was always there. What the ancients tried to remind us is this: you are not an anomaly within the cosmos. You are a frequency within it. And the cycles of the moon are not happening to you. They are happening inside you at the same time. And the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you will stop trying to control a life that actually only needs to be read with attention. Comment down below the word attention if you understood deep down that this video was less about the moon and more about you. And if you are not subscribed to the channel, understand this. This video is a coordinate within a larger map. The next videos show what happens after this window, the following phases of the cycle. The most common mistakes during the 14 days of integration, the decisions that usually appear between one full moon and the next new moon. If you receive isolated pieces, you have information. If you receive the entire sequence, you have context. And context is what separates those who transform their own cycle from those who only watch their own cycle pass by. What you heard today was the preparation. The final revelation of what all this means for your new life is in the next video, which now appears on the screen. Click on it. The first 60 seconds will change the timeline of what you thought was yours.